This is Happy Heart Cell. This is Happy Heart Cell. A kind soul recommended it to me, many thanks. Now, I'll have to be honest up front and say, this game did not impress me. But that don't mean we can't talk about it. I want to talk about why this game did not quite cut it for me. If you've tried it, or if you're gonna try it, then do utilize the comment section, because I want to hear your take too. First up, there's no tutorial in the game. You learn the interact button pretty quickly, because otherwise you're not gonna advance in the intro. But it took me like half an hour before I realized that the inventory button is a thing, and that it was an inventory. And the game doesn't tell how enemies work either. In fact, I've played this game for a few hours, and I'm still not fully sure how they work. Sometimes they clearly chase you. These are usually the fast enemy kind, and the game usually warns you of these. But then there's the random ones you find around everywhere, and they look like they just walk around randomly. But they also tend to nudge towards you in a very suspicious kind of way pretty often. And if you're not aware of this, then you might not be prepared that these two randos from fuck across the room decide to play pools closed on you. And the game doesn't tell you that enemies doesn't have to touch you either. You just have to be one tile in front of them. That would have been nice to know from the start. And the game doesn't tell you the medical thingy can heal you. Otherwise, it's not that big of a deal. But all this is still kind of a bother. I'm not too fond of the enemy AI in general while we're at it, because it feels mostly RNG, and like you can do a little bit with timing once you realize the enemies all move in a rhythm, but usually they're just annoying or in the way more than they're an actual threat. Because like, they're dumb as a traffic cone and they do like 1 or 2 hearts of damage and you've got like a bajillion hearts up there. But I don't believe the mechanical part here is necessarily a deal breaker, because I don't think it's the most important part of the game. Instead, I think the most important part of the game is the RPG aspect. Instead of just a list of random porn animations, this game lets you walk between porn scenes, explore the world they're set in, and get to know the main character who's in the center of it all. It becomes like a full interactive fetish fantasy. I think this idea is good, but I don't think it's handled very well. The world is not very fleshed out, there's barely any dialogue, and a lot of things just make no sense. Maybe I feel all this is unnecessary because it's just supposed to be a fetish game, but you could easily have made an interesting and consistent world and added a lot more character interaction as fetish content. Look at a game like Tits, it does a wonderful job of doing exactly this. There's a bunch of characters and tits tied to unique kinks, and you can milk a lot of fetish fuel by interacting with these characters. And then there's the main character who I'm not even sure what sort of relationship I'm supposed to have with him. You could have gone down multiple roads here. You could have went the Undertale way and make a silent protagonist, some ambiguous, unfeeling, unexpressive lord of stoicism who's just up for the player to add personality to. You could also have gone for like an actual character who we get to know and emphasize with underway. The main character of Happy Heart Cell, it feels kind of like you did both of these while also doing neither at the same time. You make a character with a distinct look and distinct personality we see in the intro, but then he remains quiet for like the whole rest of the game. If we're supposed to emphasize with him, tell us what he thinks, what he feels about stuff. What does he think of new areas? What does he think of new items? What does he think of enemies? We hear some thoughts occasionally, but if the center of the game is like the experience of the game world, and we're supposed to experience the game through this guy, I think we should hear him reflect on stuff like almost at any given opportunity. Both as a way to get to know the main character better and as a way to get more details on the world. But what I think you really intended to do with him is make the character really unlikable, so that way we would really want to see all this pimpification stuff happen to him. I think? I know this sounds really odd if I'm mistaken, but I just can't imagine any other reason you would introduce the guy the way you do. First thing he does in the intro is insult everyone in the school. Then he tells the principal, whose job it is to keep him locked in, that he's planning to escape. And then he insults the entire school for no given reason again. I can't imagine why you'd establish someone as mean and stupid this fast, if not because you don't want us to like him. But if this is the case, then I still think we should get to hear some more thoughts by him. Preferably some scared or uncomfortable thoughts, since we're gonna be taking the role of sadistic overlords looking down on him. Yet the closest thing we get to reflections are these boards that hang around, which might have been a good way to do this if we ran with the silent Undertale protagonist. But since we've got an actual character, he's just awkwardly silent. And I'd still like to see a lot more than we do in those boards anyway. I do think the world could use some work too. Some folks might think I'm just overthinking this point. Maybe I am, but I feel like the world doesn't make sense, and it breaks immersion for me. Why does the school have a colossal sissification lab? Why does every other student try to rape the player? Why does the principal have a fucking volcanic cave in the back of their office? I don't think you need to justify every detail of this world. Certainly wouldn't hurt, but I get this is just a porn game, right? It's just hard for me to get immersed in this world when I'm not even sure what this school is supposed to be. And I don't think it would be that hard to make up some kind of justification for just the most important parts, right? Let's say, for an example, that this school is known nationwide because of how successful they are at making asshole teens grow up, right? But in reality, they're only so successful because they use all this sissification stuff to scare the students into behaving. And the students that just never start behaving, they get turned into sex slaves and then sold off to some underground market, which is why the school has so much money, or something like that. And then instead of all the students being against you, you would only have to look out for the school staff while you were trespassing, and then you'd be able to actually talk with the other students and hear their stories about what the staff might have done to them. And then some students might have grown like Stockholm syndrome and actually started to get into this whole sissification thing. I'm just making shit up right now. My point is, I think the school could have been a lot more interesting than it currently is. Right now, everything just feels like randomly dropped in there. Largely, this is the biggest problem I have with this game. There's a few other things, though they're mostly small. Like, when you try to read something, enemies sometimes walk up and camp you because the game doesn't pause when you read a sign or pick up an item. And when there's so little text to begin with, it kinda sucks that the game punishes you for reading the little there actually is. There's this one shark girl who asks you for sex, which is pretty hilarious when everyone else just rapes you. But the thing is, she says she'll help you if you fuck her, but if you confront her after sex, she just asks you to fuck her again. I don't know if it's a bug. It seems like it. It's just weird that, you know, it's never acknowledged afterwards. I don't know, I just wanted to mention that. And the sex animations tend to be very loop-ish, so a couple of times you're probably gonna be in doubt whether you're supposed to press buttons or whether it advances by itself. I just think you could add like a meter or something in the top so people could see how far the animations are. And while we're at sex scenes, I'd suggest adding some text alongside it. I mean, I guess you can survive on animation alone, but I don't think it would hurt to add some text. Some artists like Mitzi's use dialogue despite his animations already being fucking sick. And some games like Parafor or Tits have purely written porn scenes, so don't underestimate text. To end with, I'd like to show you another game called Naked Order. This is an action RPG where you play as a teen running around in a dangerous environment and doing tasks based on a fetish. Smells a lot like Happy Hearts Hell, and I wanted to show it because it has a lot of great examples of how to properly execute all the stuff I just talked about. The opening introduces the player as a poor teen with a lot of debt who gets pressured into doing dangerous fetish porn to make up the money she owes. You're gonna go around town naked, do various tasks while the whole thing gets caught on like a bajillion cams around town. Then it gets sold to some rich assholes and you get a fuck ton of cash. The important part of this scenario of some upper class dudes running a shady underground porn industry is that it explains why we're doing what we're doing, and it's even pretty believable, which is all this scenario needs to do. Then we get a tutorial explaining everything, what symbols mean, who we want to look out for, how many tiles away people can detect us from, and the game has a sneak mechanic which makes you harder to detect but also slower. The dialogue from the main character in the intro puts a lot of focus on how nervous she is. By the time the game started for real, I was starting to feel with her. The moment when you go out naked for the first time felt like a genuinely nerve-wracking moment because of the build-up. The game has little scenes scattered around town that you can activate to hear the thoughts of the main character. And as the game progresses and you get more into doing all this exhibitionist shit, these scenes changes and become more lewd. The outcome of the orders you're supposed to complete also changes depending on your lewdness level. Sometimes you even get dialogue in between nights based on the people who have seen you. And if you get sighted too often, it will actually cause more police to patrol the areas during the nighttime. The game world feels alive, there's constantly dialogue to make it emphasize with the main character, and there's so much choice, be it side quests, what orders you do, different endings. This game doesn't even have very good art, but it's a great example of how far you can go on just good game design alone. I don't think Happy Hearts Hell should be exactly like Naked Order, but I do think you can learn a lot by looking at Naked Order and being more conscious about why you design your games the way you do. This is the first game by the creator, so I'll be looking forward to their future projects. If you wanna find this dude, then go Google Doggy Bones Patreon. I can't link cause YouTube hates NSFV, so you're gonna have to find him yourself. That's all I had to say. Hope you learned something. Eat your vegetables.